leading the Workstream on trading trust and transparency, and we have had, it's been a really fun workstream. We've had people, we've had consultants, we've had auditors, we've had clients in the room, we've had publishers, so we've kind of, I'm trying to, if you like, represent trading trust and transparency from all sorts of different angles. And I think from my perspective, our discussions and debates were quite lively and quite opinionated, and I certainly would be lying if I said everybody agreed on every issue and every point that was raised. But what we did have in common was nobody was happy with the status quo. Nobody kind of said, why are we wasting our time talking about this? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. There was just no concept of anybody being happy and not looking for change. And I guess, why is that? Well, we live in a world where we spend our money really matters. And literally during the time while we were working on this work stream, we witnessed some pretty big things happening. For example, only 4 weeks ago, we had riots on the streets of the UK, and the whole root of the reasoning behind the anti-immigration riots was misinformation that was spread on, predominantly on X, but on social media platforms. And that made us really think, the money we're spending, the money that people in this room are spending, is funding platforms that spread disinformation that is so poorly regulated that leads to people going on the streets and rioting. When you read about why the CEO of Telegram has been arrested, what was happening on that platform, and again, it's not a big player, but it's an advertiser-funded model. And then we had, of course, the end of GARM, so the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. GARM was set up after the 2019 New Zealand mosque shootings that were live streamed on Facebook. And they were set up with the sole purpose of protecting advertisers from either being in harmful content for the brand or from inadvertently funding harm. So you've got and you have an organisation like that. They've done heaps and heaps of work around things like brand safety flaws that have been spread across the whole of the world. They've done loads and loads of work in terms of environment and the environmental impact of media choices that we make. They don't exist anymore due to the threat of litigation from X. So I guess, it's never mattered more than it matters now, how and where we spend our money and why we spend our money and what are the business models behind why we're spending money where we're spending it. So somebody told me that if you've got a problem to solve, and you've got an hour to solve it, you should spend 55 minutes identifying the problem and 5 minutes finding the solution, So when I started off in the first workstream, I was like, right, we're going to get in one really punchy sentence and we're going to tell everybody this is what we're trying to solve, and we're going to really articulate the problem properly. And we completely failed in that mission, right? The problem is so big and it's so multifaceted, and it kind of comes at you from all sorts of different angles. So what we kind of settled on is we're going to try and identify the problem and therefore the solution from 4 different angles. So we thought about it from the advertiser's point of view first. We thought about it from the agency's point of view, and again, we're just going to talk about media agencies here because they're so involved in the trading models. We thought about it from the point of view, again, of publishers. So a lot of what we talked about, we have publishers on the work stream, none of the other traditional media owners were involved, but a lot of the issues that the publishers identified, I think, are common across all of the kind of quality, highly regulated media channels that are out there. And then we thought about it from the consumer. So I'm going to just kind of run you through what we thought about, what we thought in terms of what the quick wins, what are the kind of bigger questions that we can't possibly solve in 20 minutes. I'm going to just mention as well, because there's already a lot of great work being done in the UK in this whole area. So I'm going to touch on that, and then I'm going to touch on a kind of bigger thought that we had to end the whole thing. So I guess first and foremost, from an advertiser's perspective, because we've all got to remember whose money it is that we're talking about in this room today, And I think when I talk to our clients, I kind of think, well, you've got the really hard jobs, right? You've got to think about anything from manufacturing to distribution to production to share prices to actually marketing is kind of one of many things that our business, our clients have to think about. And our clients have quite a big responsibility, I think, because when they spend money, they're kind of spending money on behalf, they've got to answer to their shareholders, and they've also got responsibility to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that they employ. So relatively, from an agency perspective, we've got relatively the easy bit. But advertisers do also have the power because they can choose where and when to spend their money. They can choose what kind of platforms they want to fund and what kind of media owners they want to support. But equally, they've got this kind of thing where, well, we're responsible to shareholders. We also need to deliver the best results. We want to do the right thing. And what do they need really as an advertiser? They need a trusted relationship with their media agency. And I think where advertisers now live in a world where media agencies are encouraging undisclosed models, for example, where an advertiser literally doesn't know at what price the media is being bought and resold to them, or inventory media where an agency is potentially buying chunks of media, repackaging it, repurposing it and selling on to clients. I think clients are in a kind of thing of what they might want to do the right thing, but it's actually a difficult thing to do the right thing. So the quick wins we thought of in terms of clients really were a few. So I think firstly that the industry's probably never been better served with consultants and auditors. There's a hell of a lot of them in this room right now that are making me a bit nervous, but we've never been more well served with people who can help advertisers around the whole contractual compliance and things like that. Equally, trade bodies can be super useful. And I think advertisers look increasingly at different media solutions. So that might be elements, what can they in-house? Because that gives them a little bit more control. Can they work with more than one agency? That can give them a little bit more control. So there are different kind of short-term things that advertisers can do. But I think, for me, the longer-term question for advertisers really to redefine what do they want from a media agency. And that kind of leads me on to this lot, of which we're one. And I think this is the top 15 spending media agencies in the UK, according to Campaign. And I think where media agencies sit increasingly is this area where, yes, we're still profitable. The network agencies are certainly big profit centres into the holding companies, and I think that's pretty well documented. But it's one thing to make profits, another thing to have lost the trust of the advertisers that you work with. And I think that loss of trust manifests itself in two ways. I think there's an emotional thing around losing trust, and there's also a kind of rational thing. And I think the emotional thing is, and I know there's a separate workstream been looking all about, is this a great career? Is this where people want to work? But people I talk to, there is a genuine thing about people don't really want to work in this environment of, I work with advertisers, I want to do the right thing. The advertiser doesn't really trust my business or doesn't trust the recommendations I'm making. I don't think it's a really healthy ecosystem for agencies to be in and for people who work there. And I think on a rational level, for sure, the amount of money that can be made in the short term from going down, whether it's proprietary media or undisclosed models or rebates or whatever it might be, short term there's great commercial gains that are available to agencies if they choose to take them. But it leads to shorter pitch cycles. It leads to it leads to the kind of jeopardy of losing a big client when that big client is also, you're also able to make money elsewhere through that big client is huge. So I think it leads to this kind of insecurity as an industry. And so that kind of leads on to a lack of quality in terms of relationship. So I guess we need to just have a bit of a, we had a big debate in the thing. I said, well, we could work out what would a healthy agency remuneration be in order to get, to have a completely transparent business relationship. And we ummed and ahed about whether to talk about this or not. And in the end, I got told I had to, so here I go. So we've done some maths, right? This is based on publicly available data. 7,800 people work in the agencies with the logos up there, and they look after £8.2 billion of billings in the UK. So all of the following things are publicly available. We've got average salary data, we've got overhead recovery data, we know what profit margins holding companies make, and we can work out very clearly for every single person working in one of these agencies, the media agency has to be charging out about 135k. That's based on the average salary, the average overhead recovery, and a target profit margin. Most clients are not paying £135,000 for everybody working on their business FTE. They're not. The other way of looking at that is 13% of the Nielsen billings. So 13% of Nielsen billings. People look at me like I'm mad. That is what is being taken by this group of agencies out of the ecosystem. So this isn't an agency person saying, hey, clients, pay us more and you'll get transparent service. This is me saying currently 13% of Nielsen billings is being earned by these guys based on the publicly available data that I've just chatted through. So, and if the other way of looking at it is even just looking at the average salaries, the average salary of this group of people multiplied through by the number of people they employ is 6% of their Nielsen billings. So if an advertiser was paying an agency 6% of their billing, of their Nielsen billings, that would only cover the basic salary. That wouldn't even cover their national insurance or a desk or a laptop or anything else they might need. So those are the numbers. You can like them or hate them. That's publicly available data, and just thought I'd share it. From, I guess, the other angle we wanted to talk about really is the publisher, because the amount of money that the publishers are losing now to ad fraud, to MFA sites, let alone to platforms that are under-regulated, is huge. So again, I'm being a bit of a stato today, but a couple of stats I'll give you. The ANA reckon £200 billion of ad revenue is lost to ad fraud, 13 billion going into MFA sites. And Ubiquity have reported they've seen up to 27% of ad spend go to MFA sites. That is huge. And for advertisers...
Tell us what MFA stands for.
Oh, sorry. good check. Made for advertising sites. So that's not real sites. That's basically made for advertising sites where you're generating ad fraud through MFA sites. So from an advertiser perspective, that's horrific. That's like you're wasting 30% of your money. It's going into fraudulent hands. It's going elsewhere. It's not going to reach legitimate audiences through legitimate sites. But for the publishers, it's devastating. I mean, they literally are, can they or can't they afford to continue to operate in the market? So quality publishers reach 90% of the UK every single week. And yet they're still losing all of this revenue to alternative, unregulated sites, to platforms, to MFA, to ad fraud. And I think when advertisers are buying anything purely on a CPA basis or a CPM basis, or buying undisclosed or something like that, we're literally, as an industry, we're saying, we don't mind. We don't mind where the ads appear. We don't mind if it's in a regulated site or an unregulated site. We don't mind if it's in among disinformation or if it's around quality journalism. So I think for me, the big solution on this from a publisher perspective is around KPIs and just making sure that we are not driving ourselves into this declining circle of chasing eyeballs, chasing KPIs without thinking about context, environment, and where we want to be. And I guess finally, from the consumer perspective, there's a whole load of stuff going on with consumers. So, we all welcome more content, we all welcome more tech. As consumers, we love it, we consume it, we share it, we interact with it. But I think consumers have genuine concerns over privacy. They have genuine concerns over ad bombardment. They have genuinely concerns over the environment and the environmental impact of some of the decisions that we're making. So from a consumer perspective, this is not just about disinformation and those concerns. It's actually about what kind of content do we want, what kind of media industry do we want to be, what kind of media really do we want to be delivering to consumers. I should, by the way, say that there's a lot of really good work going on in the UK on this whole issue. So our Workstream was not the first people to discuss it, debate it, start talking about solutions. So there's everything from the ISBA framework, a contractual framework that they have with advertisers, through to some of the work that the ad association's done, particularly around things like trust in advertising and the environment. There's the IAB Gold Standard, there's the ASA, who famously like to make sure that advertising that we see is legal, decent, honest and truthful. There's Conscious Advertising Network, who have 180 members now, who are all about basically ensuring quality of content. And there's the UK SAFC, which I must admit I hadn't known much about up till now, but they are a body who are all about stopping advertising funding crime, because basically that's a lot of what we're talking about is funding criminal activity. So I guess from our perspective, it's like there's all these brilliant people doing brilliant stuff. Why are we still talking about this? Why are we still in the world we are in? So we talked about a bunch of different solutions. We talked about, is it because we're interacting with the CMO, not the CEOs? Is it because, is there a need for greater regulation in terms of the media agency model or in terms of publishing or anything? We even talked about, is there a need for a Netflix-style expose on the whole industry and blow it all out? But Brian and Nick told us we had to be positive and future-facing, so I'm going to be positive. We came up with a bit of a concept around having a charter, so potentially in conjunction with a lot of the organisations I talked about in the previous slide, but what kind of sits above that? And I think it would be nice just to define what we think good advertising can and should do. So how can advertising, how can we as an industry create ads that people want to watch, that they'll engage with? How can we make sure we're funding the right kind of content, not the wrong kind of content? How can we make sure that all the messaging that we're delivering is true and above board? And so we just thought about redefining really what good advertising could look like, and then potentially having that as almost like a kite mark. So do you qualify for the Good Advertising Charter? And how we could make the Good Advertising Charter work across all the different groups that we talked about. So agencies would have to qualify, publishers, etc., media owners would have to qualify. And then potentially even making the Good Advertising Charter a consumer-facing kite mark, so that when consumers were receiving advertising in certain environments and certain types of advertising, they would know that advertising had been created and delivered to them with a responsible lens through it. So you may or may not love the idea of a charter, a good advertising charter, but I definitely think at this point, I think advertisers and agencies really need to redefine what do we want, how can we recreate a kind of honest relationship so that agencies become trusted advisors of clients and not fall into becoming just a retailer who's buying media at one price and selling it on to a client at a different. I think agencies need to work out how they can deliver better transparency to the clients that they work with and properly represent them. I think publishers probably need to do more and be more vocal about challenging some of the KPIs that we're now working with. And I think overall, we talked about this whole thing about on matters of principle, we just need to move forward, and there should be an appetite for change. I think everybody's in this room because they've got an appetite to change. So I just hope that sparks the discussion and debate for the future.
I feel slightly embarrassed to be in collusion, both as a media owner and as a client. And if we walk away with nothing else today, I think 13% of Nielsen, when Nielsen is already inflated, link that to Michael's point about holding companies, inflated salaries, and you get the perfect storm in there. There are a lot of media folk in the room. We do have a couple of minutes if anybody wants to make a statement or a question or yeah, it was ever thus. Sorry.
So I'll come running round. If you could, if you keep your hand up while I run to you. Where was it? Way over there. It would be over there. Hang on while I run through. If you could say your
Anybody
name.
outside, there are some seats in the front.
I know who you are, but if you could say your name and the company, that would be great.
My name is Omar Oakes. I'm a journalist. But it was just because at the end of Michael Farmer's presentation, it looked like a really interesting slide that we couldn't see. I was just wondering if we could just see that, if we had a bit of time.
Shit, I'm not sure we can go backwards, but we'll send it to you afterwards. But
I thought Omar was going to ask a really difficult question there, but
Yeah,
he didn't for us.
yeah.
Any other questions? Please raise
Any
your
other
hand and I'll
questions
run
or
to you.
observations? We don't have to. There are a lot of people in the room who are
Okay,
also
thank you
working
very
in
much.
the,
Hello.
group.
So Dan from ISBA. Good to see your logo up there, thank you. What you mentioned in terms of a kite mark that everyone can have, the IAB gold standard purports to be this, or wants to be this. What do you think is wrong with the IAB gold standard as an option for everyone to adopt?
Yeah.
There are people from IAB here as well.
Okay, nothing wrong with the. Is this one? Yeah. Nothing wrong with the IAB gold standard. I guess my point is we have all of these things and yet we're still where we are. So what is there that we can do that goes above and maybe sits above all of the things that we have? That the reason I put the ISBA logo up there is because of all the great work you've done in terms of the media services framework. But I feel like you've done all of this great framework, but everyone knows where we are, right? Everyone's still buying undisclosed models and inventory media. Not everybody, but according to the ANA anyway, half of advertisers are now buying in that world. And if people can't join the dots up, that is what's leading to quality publishers losing revenue and advertisers funding disinformation and made for advertising sites and crime and all of this. We just need to go further. We need something else.
Yeah, I think partly pray and spray and partly advertising and marketing is this much of most people's businesses.
Yeah.
The point that was made earlier. There's another question here, and then right behind.
Perfect, let me come to you. Nick, if you can say who you are.
Nick Swimer, I'm a partner at a law firm called Lee & Thompson. We've got this sort of multiplicity of verification vendors and increasingly responsible agencies, including yourself, who are trying not to spend their clients' money on MFA and fraud. So why is it that so much is going to MFA and fraud? Is it that the agencies have lost control of the programmatic value chain? We know that, according to the ISBA study, about 50% of the money is going into the, into that part of the value chain. So are they now running the show, really? And that's why we can't, it's an unstoppable tide.
I think for me, it starts with what are the KPIs that agencies are being set. So I think it starts with if you are tasked with just delivering a CPA, for example, without any filter in terms of what the rules are around delivering that cost per acquisition, then that's what then leads into all of this stuff that's happening. So I don't really know whose responsibility it is to reframe the KPIs. Is it consultants? Is it agencies? Is it clients? The answer is it's probably all of the above. But I think some advertisers will set different KPIs than others. So some advertisers will set KPIs around service, quality, value. So nobody's saying that media agencies aren't here to drive brilliant value for clients. They are, but it's how you define that driving brilliant value, I think.
No pressure, Rachel, but you might have to say something on this later.
Was there another hand up
One more
there?
question
Oh, lovely.
there,
There we go.
and
Last
then-
question to you.
Move on.
It's Jeff Eels at Sky. So traditional broadcasting, we've been, I've spent my life in Thinkbox, Clearcast, Barb, in a world where everything is regulated, where we can't move without making sure everything is compliant. And we all know, we're moving into an IP world, which is moving towards the world that you've just described. But it does seem to me that we're being encouraged to move into that world, into an impressions trading world, that if we don't have some very regular high standards to hit, we may well be, all the inventory you currently buy that you think is safe could be into this world. So what on earth can we do? Certainly from our side would be, we want to keep all those wonderful standards that mean that 1 is equal to 1. But it seems we're being encouraged to go down the other route. Is that right?
So we had a really good debate about this in one of the work streams, actually, and there was a view that, you know, well, if you open the door to that kind of trading model, then you get what you wish for. Is the reality of it, and I think, you know, the publishers. You know, you end up saying, well, if we don't, what's going to happen? But if you do, then you are definitely opening your world up to a, you know, you're opening yourselves up to an opportunity to just compare the numbers and to have no filter at all on the quality content that you guys are delivering to clients.
I think that's a wonderful segue, actually, into the next segment. Thank you. Thanks to Jenny.